Hello everyone. You're watching Six Path Weeb, where imagination reshapes the world of anime. Today, we're diving into a powerful what-if scenario. What if Naruko mastered sealing jutsu and combined it with Sage Mode? How strong would she become? How would it change the story? And could this version of Naruko surpass everything we've seen? Before we begin. Disclaimer, this content is created purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any anime footage used, all rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now, let's get started. Naruko had always been curious about the world around her. While other children her age played in the streets, she liked to sit quietly and observe, noticing the little details that others overlooked, the way leaves swayed in the breeze, the rhythm of footsteps on stone paths, and the hushed conversations that floated through the village at dusk. She did not know everything about her past, but she knew enough to understand that she was different. People often looked at her with uncertainty, sometimes even fear, though she had never done anything to deserve it. Instead of letting that trouble her heart, Naruko chose to focus on something else: learning. Books became her closest companions. The village library, though not always welcoming, held stories and knowledge that opened entire worlds for her. She read about history, about ancient techniques, and about the art of seals, Jutsu, which fascinated her the most. To Naruko, seals were like puzzles waiting to be solved, patterns that could shape energy and create something meaningful. She practiced quietly, using bits of ink and scraps of paper. At first, her attempts were messy. Lines smudged, symbols overlapped, and nothing seemed to work the way she imagined. But Naruko was patient. She studied each mistake, adjusted her designs, and tried again. One evening, as golden sunlight filtered through the trees at the edge of the forest, Naruko sat beneath a large tree whose roots curled around her like a gentle shelter. This had become her special place, a quiet corner where she could think, learn, and simply be herself. With careful hands, she drew a small seal on a flat stone. She took a deep breath, focused her energy, and placed her hand over it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, softly, the shadows around her seemed to shift, not in a frightening way, but like a curtain gently moving in the wind. Naruko blinked in surprise. She hadn't created something grand or powerful, but it worked. It responded to her. A wide smile spread across her face. "That's it," she whispered. "I'm getting closer." From that day on, Naruko continued refining her technique. She discovered that by focusing carefully, she could blend her presence with the shadows, not to hide from others, but to move quietly and peacefully, like part of the world itself. She named her creation Ryoko no Kage, which meant Journey of Shadows. But Naruko did not stop there. She knew that true strength was not just about one skill. So she trained her body too, running through forest paths, balancing along fallen branches, and practicing movements she had pieced together from observation and imagination. She crafted her own style, one that felt natural and graceful, like a dance guided by instinct. Even when things were difficult, Naruko never let frustration take over. If something didn't work, she treated it as a lesson. If she felt alone, she reminded herself that she was growing stronger, wiser, and kinder with each passing day. Deep in her heart, Naruko carried a quiet dream, not of proving others wrong, but of showing them who she truly was. Someone thoughtful. Someone capable. Someone who belonged. And as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Naruko looked at her hands, ink-stained and steady, and felt a gentle sense of pride. She didn't have all the answers yet. But she was on her way. Once she felt she had full chakra control, Naruko smiled to herself and brushed a strand of golden hair from her face. She decided it was time to try something new, learning simple jutsu from each of the major nature styles. To her, it felt like exploring different songs the world could sing. She believed this would help her discover her strongest connection while also gently building others. Naruko had read in old scrolls that mastering every type of nature transformation was extremely rare. Only the wise Sandaime Hokage was said to have come close. Still, she wasn't discouraged. Instead, she felt inspired. One day, she dreamed, she would grow strong enough to stand proudly among the greatest leaders, not just in strength, but in kindness and understanding too. At first, Naruko didn't notice much difference while practicing simple D-rank techniques. Each one felt like learning a new rhythm, steady, predictable, and comforting. But when she carefully tried a slightly more advanced C-rank jutsu from a book she had quietly borrowed, something changed. She noticed that wind techniques flowed through her easily, like a gentle breeze guiding her hands. Earth techniques, on the other hand, felt heavier, like lifting stones one by one. Wind must be where my heart connects most, she said softly, watching leaves swirl at her fingertips. Even so, Naruko made a thoughtful decision. She would spend extra time practicing the natures that felt more difficult. To her, every challenge was simply a chance to grow. As always, she began by reading. She studied how chakra could be shaped into each element and what kinds of changes might happen. She even read books about physics and biology, curious about how the world worked at its smallest levels. The pages were dusty, as if few had opened them before. That made Naruko a little sad. If we're going to work with nature, she thought, we should understand it, too. By the time she turned 9, Naruko had learned a wide variety of C and B rank jutsu. She didn't rush ahead, though. Instead, she focused on practicing her favorite techniques until they felt as natural as breathing. Sometimes she even tried performing them with fewer hand seals, smiling each time she improved, even just a little. One peaceful afternoon, a letter arrived from the Hokage. In it, he kindly suggested that Naruko attend the academy. He wrote that she shouldn't spend all her time alone and that being around other children might bring her happiness. Naruko read the letter twice. She understood there was more to it than just a suggestion. The Hokage cared about her, but he also carried great responsibility. She respected that. Even so, Naruko sighed softly. She already knew everything the academy would teach. She worried it might take time away from her training. But she also wondered. Maybe it could be a chance to meet others her age. I'll make the best of it, she decided. Still, Naruko didn't want to fall behind in her practice. So she came up with a clever idea. Traveling quietly to a calm river deep within the forest, she prepared to try something she had never attempted before, a special sealing technique. She worked patiently, drawing and redrawing the seal until it felt just right. Each line was careful, each curve precise. After many tries, she nodded with quiet confidence. This is it. She found a sturdy log and placed the seal on top. Adding a small touch of her own chakra-infused ink, she gently covered it with soft mud. Then, focusing deeply, she placed her hand over the seal. With a calm breath, she whispered, "Fun, Kyukyoku Bunshin no Jutsu." A warm glow shimmered around the log. Naruko had carefully designed this technique to create a strong and steady clone, one that could help her balance her time between learning and living. She imagined it as a partner, not just a tool. Something that could grow alongside her. As the light faded, Naruko opened her eyes, hopeful and excited. To her, this wasn't just about becoming stronger. It was about learning, growing, and finding her place in the world, one gentle step at a time. Naruko would have spent more time perfecting and practicing her clone technique while going to class, switching places with it now and then. But she chose not to risk it. She knew she couldn't perfectly copy her full personality into a clone. If she attended for a few days and then suddenly sent in a clone that behaved differently, someone would surely notice. There were other things to consider too. Some students came from observant families who paid close attention to details, how a person moved, how they spoke, even how their energy felt. A clone might seem convincing at first, but over time, small differences could give it away. Naruko didn't want to cause confusion or worry anyone. So she made her decision: the clone would attend the academy from the very beginning. She carefully looked over the clone once it formed, using the last of her energy to make sure everything seemed just right. "You're going to the academy in my place," Naruko said gently. "Act like you're me. Stay in the village, learn what you can, and only come find me if something truly important happens, or when you graduate. That's your goal. Try to keep things simple and stay out of trouble. Understood?" "Yosh. Databayo." The clone replied brightly, bouncing with cheerful energy before hurrying off toward the village. Naruko watched her go and gave a small, tired smile. "That should work," she murmured softly. Moments later, she drifted into a deep sleep. When Naruko woke up, the forest greeted her with soft rustling leaves and beams of sunlight filtering through the branches above. She had made a quiet home beneath a large, sheltering tree in a peaceful part of the woods. Life there was simple, but she had grown used to it. She gathered fruits, found fresh water, and listened to the songs of birds each morning. Now that she no longer needed to visit the village, she felt ready to explore something she had long been curious about: the mysterious seal within her. She had read many books and listened carefully to everything she could learn, but no one had explained a seal quite like hers. It seemed to have layers, like petals of a flower yet to bloom. Naruko believed that if she gently touched only the outermost layer, she might understand it better without causing harm. Taking a deep breath, she focused a small, careful amount of energy into her fingertips. With steady determination, she placed her hand lightly against the seal. A sudden, overwhelming sensation washed over her, not painful, but powerful and surprising, like stepping into a rushing river. Everything faded. When Naruko opened her eyes again, she found herself in a wide, echoing space that looked like a long, quiet corridor. Soft ripples of water shimmered beneath her feet, reflecting the dim light around her. The air felt heavy, but not frightening, just full of something vast and ancient. She stood slowly and looked around with curiosity. At the far end, she sensed a presence. It was strong, like a great mountain or a roaring ocean, yet it did not move toward her. Instead, it waited. Naruko took a few careful steps forward. As she walked, she noticed something comforting. Despite the size and mystery of this place, she did not feel alone or lost. It felt, in a quiet way, like a part of herself. At last, she reached a large gate that stretched from floor to ceiling. Behind it, she could feel the presence more clearly now, immense, steady, and watchful. Naruko paused. Rather than feeling afraid, she felt respectful. This was something important, something worthy of kindness and understanding. So she knelt down politely, placing one hand over her heart and lowering her head in greeting. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Naruko." For a moment, everything was still. Then, from beyond the gate, a deep and gentle voice answered, no longer harsh or frightening, but curious. "Naruko," the voice echoed thoughtfully. The great presence shifted slightly, as if surprised, not by her arrival, but by her kindness. And in that quiet, shimmering place, something new began, not a struggle, not a demand, but the beginning of a conversation. Naruko knelt quietly in the dim, glowing space within her mind. The air felt heavy, yet alive, as though it carried whispers from long ago. Before her stood the great fox, its presence vast and powerful, eyes shining like embers in the dark. She took a steady breath and spoke with calm determination. "I wish to make a partnership. Of sorts." The great fox watched her closely, its tail swaying slowly behind it. "I do not partner with humans," it said, its voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder. Naruko did not flinch. She remained where she was, her hands resting gently on her knees. "I said of sorts," she replied. "I understand how the seal works, at least a little. I know that over time, your chakra will flow through me. It already has, hasn't it?" The fox narrowed its eyes. "It has." Naruko bowed her head slightly. "Then I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take anything without asking. I just didn't know how else to speak with you." The fox studied her in silence. There was something unusual about this girl. She wasn't afraid, but she wasn't careless either. She spoke with respect, and that was something the fox had not often seen. "I don't want to use your power without your permission," Naruko continued softly. "I believe everyone should grow strong with their own strength. But since we are connected, I thought, maybe we could help each other instead." The fox tilted its head ever so slightly. "You are asking to use my chakra willingly?" "Yes," Naruko said simply. For a long moment, the fox said nothing. Then, with a quiet huff, it turned slightly. "Very well. You may use it." Naruko smiled, relieved, but then hesitated. "There's one more thing." The fox turned back, curiosity flickering in its gaze. "I was wondering if you could teach me," she said. "I don't have a family or a teacher. I learn what I can from books, but I know there's so much more. I believe knowledge is the strongest kind of power." The fox's ears twitched. That answer surprised it. "Why do you seek knowledge?" it asked. Naruko lifted her head, her blue eyes bright with hope. "Because I want to make things better," she said. "I want to understand the world so I can help people feel safe and strong, not just because they think they are, but because they truly are." The fox watched her carefully. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a quiet determination and a wish to grow. At last, it gave a slow nod. "I will share what I know. When I choose to." Naruko's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you," she said warmly. The space around her began to fade, and soon she found herself back in her body. At first, everything felt strange, like a warm current flowing through her. It was intense, but she stayed calm, remembering her promise to accept the energy rather than fight it. Time passed, and little by little, the feeling settled. When she finally stood up, she stretched her fingers and looked at her hands. "Okay," she said softly to herself. "Let's try this." She picked up a small leaf and placed it on her palm. Carefully, she focused, guiding her chakra just as she had practiced before. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, whoosh! The leaf shot straight into the air, spinning like a tiny dancer before drifting back down. Naruko blinked. Then laughed. Well, she said, smiling brightly, that was new. Instead of getting frustrated, she gathered more leaves and sat down again. I guess this just means I have more to learn. She slipped on a pair of fingerless gloves and held out her hand once more, her expression calm and determined. Let's start from the beginning, she said. And with patience, curiosity, and a hopeful heart, Naruko began her journey, one small step, and one floating leaf, at a time. It had taken Naruko 3 long years to regain full control of her chakra. At first, it had felt like trying to hold a stream of water in her hands, always slipping, always shifting. But little by little, with patience and determination, she learned how to guide it instead of fight it. She had carefully loosened the seal within her 3 times. Each time, the energy she felt grew stronger and more unpredictable, like a powerful wind trying to rush through her. The 3rd time had been the most difficult. For just a moment, the presence inside her had surged forward, surprising her. But Naruko had steadied herself, breathing deeply, focusing her mind, and gently guiding the energy back into place. Now, she knew her limits. She could safely handle up to 5 flowing layers of that energy, but she chose to remain careful. She had learned that true strength wasn't about pushing too far, it was about understanding when to pause. Every time she adjusted the seal, her chakra control would shift again, and she would need to relearn how to balance it. At first, this had frustrated her. But over time, she began to understand why it happened. Her own chakra had once been light and slightly uneven, still growing alongside her. The powerful energy inside her, however, moved differently, sometimes strong like a wave, sometimes gentle like a breeze. Through patience, Naruko trained her chakra pathways to become steadier and stronger. Instead of letting the energy surge unpredictably, she guided it into a smooth, even flow. Over time, the 2 energies began to work together more naturally, like 2 dancers learning to move in harmony. During those years, Naruko didn't just train her chakra. She also practiced her physical skills, developing her own unique style of movement and swordplay. She found ways to perform her favorite techniques with just one hand sign, making her faster and more efficient. Genjutsu, however, was her greatest challenge. Understanding it in theory was one thing, but actually using it was something else entirely. Without a teacher, it felt like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Surprisingly, the voice within her began to help. At first, their conversations had been rough and full of disagreement. But over time, something changed. The voice began offering guidance, small suggestions, helpful corrections, and new ideas. It wasn't always easy, but Naruko listened, learned, and improved. With this guidance, she even began to explore fire-based techniques, carefully shaping the warm, glowing energy into controlled forms. One afternoon, Naruko was practicing a new fire technique when she suddenly sensed one of her shadow clones rushing toward her. She quickly stopped her practice to avoid any accidents. A moment later, the clone appeared, and Naruko blinked in surprise. Instead of the simple training outfit she had given it, the clone was now wearing a bright orange jumpsuit with oversized goggles perched on its head. Naruko tilted her head. Where did you even find that? But before she could think more about it, she noticed the clone's wide, excited grin. Mizuki-sensei is amazing. The clone said, practically bouncing with energy. You won't believe what she told me. I finally have a chance to graduate. Naruko gently raised a hand to calm her down. Slow down. What happened? The clone took a deep breath. I couldn't do the regular clone technique, right? So Mizuki-sensei said there's another way. She told me that if I learned something special from a scroll kept at the Hokage's place, I can graduate. Naruko paused, thinking carefully. Something about this didn't feel quite right. Still, she didn't react harshly. Instead, she asked calmly, do you think you can get the scroll safely? Of course. The clone said confidently. I've got a plan. Naruko studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. Be careful. Find a quiet place to study it, and I'll meet you there. The clone beamed and dashed off without another thought. Naruko watched her go, then quietly stepped into the clone's shadow using her technique, following along unseen. When they reached the Hokage's residence, Naruko noticed something unusual. The guards outside were asleep, as if they had been gently lulled into rest. She frowned slightly but stayed focused. The clone climbed in through a window, unaware of anything unusual. Naruko followed silently, her mind alert, but her heart steady. Whatever happened next, she would handle it carefully. She had learned that strength wasn't just about power, it was about making wise choices, protecting others, and staying true to herself. And that was exactly what she intended to do. Naruko was curious to see how her clone would handle the situation with the Hokage. As soon as the clone gently opened the door leading into the hallway, Naruko held her breath, her bright eyes wide with anticipation. She knew she couldn't overpower the Hokage, that wasn't even an option. The best her clone could do was create a distraction. Naruko quickly thought through her plan. If her clone could guide the Hokage away, even just a little, it would give her the chance she needed. She would move quietly through the shadows, find the scroll, and leave without causing trouble. She hoped everything would go smoothly, like a clever game of hide and seek. "Naruko? What are you doing here?" the Hokage asked, surprised to see her in the hallway. Her clone hesitated for a moment, then suddenly performed a playful transformation into a dazzling, over-the-top character, more silly than anything else. The unexpected sight made the Hokage so startled that he had to sit down and catch his breath, thoroughly confused but unharmed. Naruko, watching from her hiding place, covered her face in embarrassment. "That's definitely one way to distract someone," she thought. Still, it worked, and that was what mattered. While the Hokage was distracted, the clone quietly slipped into the room they had been searching for. At the same time, Naruko stepped from one shadow into another, moving softly and carefully. Inside the room, she noticed a few scrolls that caught her attention. One had her family's symbol, and another even had her name. With great care, she took them and replaced them with simple blank scrolls, promising herself she would return them later after studying them properly. With everything secured, she slipped back into her clone's shadow just as it left the room, carrying the large scroll they had come for. Soon, they reached a peaceful forest clearing. The trees swayed gently, and sunlight filtered through the leaves. Naruko stepped out of the shadow, landing lightly on the ground. "Let's see what we found," she said quietly, unrolling the scroll. Her clone, full of energy, spun around happily. "I did it. I really did it," she cheered, twirling in excitement. Naruko smiled a little but stayed focused. She carefully read through the scroll. It described different techniques, how to perform them and what to be mindful of. One technique in particular caught her attention, a way to create many shadow clones at once. She gave it a try, forming the hand signs just as described. In moments, many copies of her appeared around the clearing, each one just as lively and determined as she was. Naruko blinked in surprise. "That worked faster than I expected," she said. She kept a few clones and asked them to copy down different techniques from the scroll while she practiced another one, shaping her chakra into a glowing rope. It shimmered softly in the air as she focused, her expression serious but calm. After some practice, she managed to form the rope successfully. It felt steady and strong, and she nodded with quiet satisfaction. Just then, Naruko sensed someone approaching. Her focus sharpened immediately. She slipped back into the shadows, while her clones calmly finished their work. Once done, they handed her the notes before disappearing in soft puffs, their knowledge returning to her all at once. Naruko's eyes widened slightly. "So that's how it works," she murmured, impressed. Moments later, a familiar voice called out, "Naruko." It was her teacher, Iruka. He stepped into the clearing, looking both concerned and relieved. One of Naruko's remaining clones smiled brightly. "Iruka-sensei. I learned a technique. Does that mean I pass?" Iruka blinked in confusion. "What? Who told you that?" "Mizuki-sensei did." The clone replied. Just then, another figure appeared from the trees. Naruko, still hidden, watched carefully. Something about this felt off. She stayed still, observing quietly rather than rushing in. The two adults began talking, and Naruko listened closely, trying to understand what was happening. The situation grew tense, but she remained calm, thinking carefully about what to do next. When things began to escalate, Naruko acted, not with harm, but with precision. Using her chakra rope, she gently slowed a fast-moving object in the air, making sure no one was hurt. From her hiding place, she listened as Iruka spoke kindly, his words filled with care and reassurance. Naruko felt something warm in her chest. She wasn't alone after all. Her clone looked up, thoughtful and quiet now, before turning and running deeper into the forest. Hidden among the shadows, Naruko watched everything unfold. Her mind was no longer racing with tricks or plans. Instead, she was beginning to understand something far more important: trust, kindness, and the courage to choose the right path. And for the first time that night, she smiled, not because of a clever plan, but because she was learning who she truly wanted to be. "Oh good Kami. Naruko thought, hurrying after her now sniffling shadow clone. She wanted to catch up before it ran too far. When she got close, she gently reached out and caught the clone by the ankle, causing it to tumble softly onto the grass. "Where do you think you're going?" Naruko whispered kindly. "I'm trying to lead Mizuki-sensei away from Iruka-sensei," the clone said, wiping her eyes. "I don't want Iruka-sensei to get hurt anymore." "That's very thoughtful," Naruko replied, her voice calm and steady. "But we need to think carefully. If we rush in without a plan, things might get more confusing instead of helping." The clone blinked, considering this, and nodded slowly. "Don't worry," Naruko continued with a reassuring smile. "Let's stay quiet and wait for the right moment. We can help in a better way." She stepped back into the shadows, watching closely. Just then, another Naruko came running out from the bushes, stopping behind a tree, with Mizuki following not far behind. Naruko tilted her head, impressed at how cleverly her clone had set things up. From her hiding spot, she listened as voices rose and fell. There were strong words, but Naruko focused on staying calm. Soon, Iruka revealed himself, and the situation grew tense. Naruko noticed that neither side seemed to be finding a peaceful solution. She glanced at her clone nearby, who took a deep breath and formed a hand sign. Naruko raised her eyebrows in surprise but gently shared a bit of her energy to help. In a puff of smoke, many Naruko clones appeared at once. "Please stop." They all called out together, surrounding Mizuki, not to harm him, but to block his path and get his attention. The sudden crowd made everything pause. "Let's talk instead," one clone said firmly. "Hurting each other won't solve anything." The forest grew quiet. Even Mizuki seemed startled by the unexpected approach. With the tension easing, Iruka stepped forward, tired but relieved. The clones stayed close, making sure everyone kept calm. Soon, the situation was under control, and Mizuki was no longer causing trouble. Iruka turned to Naruko's clone with a warm, proud smile. He handed her the headband gently. "You've done well," he said. "You've shown courage and kindness. You pass." From the shadows, Naruko watched with a small smile. Seeing her clone stand tall filled her with a quiet pride. She slipped away softly, happy that everything had turned out safely. That night, the forest felt peaceful again, and Naruko knew she had taken one more step forward, not just as a ninja, but as someone who could protect others with both strength and heart. Guys, that's all for now. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Regards. Six Path Weeb.